everyone. My name is Becca Tennell, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at the Chapman. Lovely to see so many of you tonight. Tonight, you didn't already know, we are going to hear from Janie Davies Fitzgerald as she presents on the lake property known as Joshua's Rock, and that has been in the same local family since 1812. She is an 8th generation family member. Wow. She's a retired English teacher, another teacher, and she is the family historian. Yeah. Was that a role that you just took on? Or?
Well, there's one other person that does lots of research, but he hasn't recently. And so I kind of took that over and dug into the archives, you know.
All right, so Janie is going to share the history of the property, as well as how the descendants of Reuben Seelye continue to work hard to be the stewards of the land, as well as the stories and the artwork that this property has inspired. So now I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I grew a little bit about me. I grew up on Rockhurst, which is juts out from Cloverdale. And my mom was Sharon Davies of Davies Real Estate. My brother is Dan Davies. And I had to move away to get a teaching job. So I ended up in Westchester teaching in Scarsdale. And I retired in 2023. It's wonderful to be in the 8th generation of my family to enjoy that property. I always say that I had a free-range childhood because my mom would drop me off with my brother and sister and pick us up like a half an hour before dinner time, you know, because she worked in real estate and she needed some place. So we'd go hang out with my grandmother and roam the property. And I'm also the 13th generation of the Seelye family in America. My beloved maternal grandmother was Jane Seelye West, and she never wanted to be called grandmother. And so she was called Mimsy, and it comes from Jabberwocky. 'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, did gyre and gimble in the wave. All Mimsy were the borrow groves and the mulmarass out grape. I won't do the rest of it. But, so we have about right around 100 acres right now. It started out as 200 acres, and it's about 10 miles from Glens Falls and about 5 miles from Lake George. And like if you go down Bay Road, you can see, let me see, this is Bay Road right here, and you come to the T of 9L. Our property is this right here and this right here. Here's another, this is the clearing where the houses are. So a lot of people drive by Joshua's Rock sign and wonder what the heck it is, or they're at the mountain. How many people have been to the Mountainside Library? I'm just curious. Yeah, and Linda Long has really breathed life into the library. It's amazing now. So there are 2 stories of how it got its name. The story that I learned and a lot of my cousins learned was that a steamship captain named Joshua actually like ran into that piece of rock in heavy fog. That's what I had always known until I started doing my research in the archives. And I discovered, and Linda Long put a Betty Buckles book in my hand. And there's a story in there about Joshua Harris. And Joshua Harris was, he would do anything his friends would tell him to do. They could put him up to do anything. And so he was with a friend and they saw a bear on that rock. And he said, oh, go kill that bear. And Joshua wrestled the bear into the water, and they supposedly wrestled for an hour, and he did kill the bear. So that's what the Lake George Mirror said. I don't know which is true. I don't have a time machine to go find out. But when we talk about Joshua's Rock, I kind of think of it 3 ways. One is it's the whole property. 2, it's this rock here where we like to go out. It's almost like having our private campground. And the 3rd is if you look at the topo map, across 9L, that's called Joshua's Rock, and it's an actual, you know, as it goes up in like a mountain. So we talk about it in 3 different ways. So I'm going to do some prehistory really quickly because I think it's a fascinating fact. Father Isaac Jogues was a French Jesuit priest, And he was sent to Canada with 7 other priests, and he helped to convert a lot of Huron Indians. They were in Lake Champlain, and they got attacked by the Mohawks, and he actually got captured, and they pulled out his fingernails and they chewed off some of the tips of his finger, and he escaped. And he is the first white man to have seen the lake, and he called it the Lac du Saint-Sacrement, Lake of the Blessed Sacrament. And he ended up on what would become our property. And there was a spring there that he used to clean his wounds and to drink, and he healed. And he, was rescued. He went back to do the same thing again, work, and he was captured again and killed. But Pope Pius XII made him patron saint of Canada in 1940. And the Paulist fathers used to come and collect holy water from that spring. And I remember as a kid sitting with my grandmother on the porch as she was using her oil paints and painting the lake scene. And I saw them go down, and I said, "Who is that? I don't recognize those people." And she says, "Those are the priests going to get the holy water." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." So unfortunately, in the 1970s, they did some major work on 9L, and the source got cut off. So we don't have priests on our property doing that anymore. So I'm going to talk about the property now and then take you back to then. The history of our Seelye branch, Edward Eggleston's connections Edward Eggleston's from Indiana. How did he end up in Lake George? Family literary and artistic legacies. There are so many writers, teachers, lawyers, and artists in our family. I mean, in every generation. I think that we all value literacy, and we had that mountainside library right up the hill to go and get books whenever we wanted. And I think that really helped us to grow our talents in that way. And 3 of the properties there's 6 houses, and 2 of the houses and the library are on the National Registry of Historic Places. So Joshua's Rock now, we actually have 28 cousins that are shareholders. I'll explain that in a minute. At least 80 cousins from 4 generations share the property now. When I was a kid, I would spend a lot of my summer there, and I would say, "Who is that?" I would meet a new relative almost every summer, often many new relatives. Some of the family own other Lake George houses. My uncle Tom West, he has a property on Assembly Point. My cousin Brett West, he has a property on Assembly Point. And some family live too far away, in California or North Carolina, where it's really hard to come and enjoy the property. So Kit here, she's my first cousin once removed. She hosts a picnic, and a lot of these pictures are from the picnics at her house, so that we can stay together. So this is my great-grandfather, Elwyn E. Seelye. My mom always fondly called him Bop, and some of the other relatives called him Uncle Chuck. And Kit actually wrote this, and I want to read it to you. In 1935, he took the unusual step of incorporating the family, both as a way to preserve the property. He was not happy that his own father had sold off some of the land. We used to own from Dark Bay and then one whole side of Dunhams Bay. And to bring order to its financial maintenance as the family expanded. This is probably his greatest personal legacy. We are still incorporated, still hold an annual meeting, and have preserved a major tract of woods and old growth forest along the lake, just as he left them. That's a painting by my grandmother. But what I want to say about the old growth forest is we've had foresters in there visiting, and they go absolutely nuts when they're like, "Oh my goodness, this is virgin forest, never cut." Only 1% to 2% of the forests in the United States have never been cut. And they're like, oh, can we bring tours here? Then we're thinking about the liability of that. That's not really a good idea, you know. So I want to give you a sense of what it's like to be there. I was there in 2023 as I was house hunting. My brother let me stay up at Mellowstone, and this was just after dawn. So Reuben Seelye's fortuitous purchase in 1812. Reuben Seelye actually purchased 200 acres. It was French Mountain lot number 10 for lumber, and he did lumber a lot of the property, but not down by the lake. Thank goodness. And then it's preserved still by generations 7, 8, and 9 in our family corporation. And the way the corporation was set up, there's 4 branches of the extended family. Each branch got a house plus 120 shares in the family corporation. The shares cannot be sold out of the family. You have to be a blood relative in order to get the shares. And so we all started out evenly. But what happens with families is they grow unevenly. And so especially the Seelye branch and the law branch, 4 children have 4 children, you can see what would happen in a household, especially when everybody wants to summer at Lake George. And so my grandmother got a leasehold, and she built what we call pinafore for her 4 kids, and she, in order to be able to summer. And then Allegra, Lito's here tonight, and she's from that branch, and they also have a leasehold, so that you have 4 kids or in your family? 4, right? 5. Oh, that's right, 5 kids. And so they had 5 kids so that they could have places to be. And that painting back was from Allegra. So ways that we stay connected, the 2nd or 3rd week in July is when we have our family meeting. So this year it's July 13th. We have a family picnic, and Kit has been so gracious to host a family picnic over the last, as she's been president of our corporation for the last 26 years. And we do work sessions. Sometimes the work sessions are like cutting brush, or we got rid of poison ivy. Sometimes, like I did work session where I was scanning all these important documents for our history and scanning the minutes. We love to share our writing and our art together. We have a private we had a private website for many years, and the collection got too big. So we actually right now have everything on a Google Drive, a private Google Drive, so that the leases are on there. The whole property, we just had a survey done last year of the entire property. And then the artwork, the poems, the stories, all of that, the minutes, they're all there and historical pictures. We have like phone calls, cards, emails. We still stay in touch and spend time at the lake together. On our way down to South Carolina, we drove one year, and we ended up staying in Charlotte, North Carolina at our cousin Ann's house. And weddings and funerals, of course, families get together. But what's a little bit different is there have been quite a few weddings on the property. And we have a graveyard on the property. So that's where the funerals often take place. This is my cousin Jeff, who is, I think he's 60 now, and he's still shredding it. My brother took this picture. He was going to an appointment, and he was driving, and he actually had to stop, and he happened to have the real estate camera with him. And he has a big version of that in his house. These 2 houses right here no longer belong to us. Those are the only 2 houses that don't belong to us. They got sold out during the Great Depression to pay for the taxes. It's one of the reasons we developed a family corporation, so that wouldn't happen again. So you probably have seen the library up here in the middle. That's the homestead. That's the first house. If we go down one of the little dirt roads, The cemetery is on the right and Camp Allegra is on the left. Those are the two stone houses, Mellowstone and Owl's Nest. We get sunrises, but we don't get sunsets unless we get a reverse sunset. And that's when you get a big cloud bank there and the light streams into the bay just right. And then you get a reverse sunset. So there are 6 houses on the property, plus the library, the caretaker's cottage, and the red barn. So the red barn we use for lawn equipment and such. Pinafore, that's the one that my grandmother had built, was built in 1951. My grandfather retired. He was a lawyer in New York City, and they tore down the center section and made a 2-bedroom winterized chalet. Unfortunately, he died 2 weeks before they moved in there. So he never got to live there, but my grandmother lived there from 1975 to 1988. So then there was, we've been doing some improvements since 2016. 17 of us share that one, and it's partially year round. The homestead was built in 1877, and then they started refurbishing it in 2019. The well just went in 2 days ago. So they're continuing, and 6 people share that one. This is Owl's Nest, built in 1881. That was Edward Eggleston's house. It had a refurbishing in 1981. Unfortunately, it used to be twice as big as it is now. There was a wooden structure, and it was structurally unsound, so it had to be torn down. You know, that had additional bedrooms. This is Mellowstone, which was Edward Eggleston's library. 1882 it was built, and then refurbished in 2010 by my first cousin, Drew West. And he just, one quick story. He was reconfiguring it and putting the kitchen on the front of the house instead of on the back. And my great-grandfather was a civil engineer. He had poured a cement slab with rebar reinforcement. So as they gutted the house and were getting ready to take that slab up, they realized that it had been pushing the house down the hill because it was so strong. So it's a good thing that it got refurbished, because it might have fallen in one day. And the thicket, so that's shared by 5 people. The thicket, 1905, and I think it's pretty original to what it was. And 11 people share that one. And then Camp Allegra was built in 1957 and refurbished in 2005. It's seasonal, but they do have some heat. They insulated it. They made it much more livable, you know, reduced the number of bedrooms, but made it much more livable. And then the caretaker cottage, which is across the street from the library, it is 1935, and then some more renovations in 2014. We had 3 generations of the same caretaker family. Now we have a different family in there. That's a Sears and Roebuck house. And then the library, they established the library in 1894, and it took them 10 years to get enough money to build it. And so it was built in 1904. Yes.
Which of those houses can be seen from the lake?
This one, that one, and this one and this one. Yeah, they actually I don't think can you see the homestead from the lake? I don't think, but very. Yeah. Yep. So okay, I'll use the laser pointer next time. So the oldest picture I have is of Reuben Seelye. She was how do you pronounce it?
Oh, I don't know.
she was Reuben's wife. And so this is a picture of her when she was 80 years old. This picture right here, this is Reuben Seelye, and they had 6 children, so they are just sitting out by the Owl's Nest. This is Reuben Seelye. This right here is Reuben E. Seelye, so he's a son of him, and he's my great-grandfather. And then we have Bud, which is Kit's Dad, this is Jane. This is my grandmother. We have Edward, and we have Bet. And then Kit is here tonight. She is the last person in our family with the last name Seelye. And she didn't have any kids, so it's not, nobody had any kids with the Seelye name, unfortunately. So it's
Some people have it
as a middle name, exactly. So the timeline, so 1760, we got the patent from King George III. That's over on Sunnyside Road. And our original homestead was the Austin house for a long time. It's a big stone house. The first Reuben Seelye was a mason, so he built that house. He also built the bazaar, the big stone building in Lake George Village, which I think is the oldest building in Lake George Village. And he built a big stone building up in Warrensburg that's kind of at the corners by the bandstand. In 1812, Reuben bought the tract. He was doing so much lumbering. He also bought the tract that on Rockhurst, where the East Lake George house was, where the Kirkpatrick's family. And so I grew up in Rockhurst and rode down Seelye Road every day, which is kind of funny. But he had 60 teams of horses. He was very, very successful in his lumber. Yeah, just where do you put 60 teams of horses? So Mountainside Free Library, like I said, established in 1894, took them 10 years to get enough money. And finally, Andrew Carnegie, who was a friend of Edward George Carey Eggleston, Edward Eggleston's brother, gave $1,000 to kind of put them over the top so that they could do it. Joshua's Rock Corporation was established, and then those 3 buildings ended up on the historic registry. So I want to talk about Elwyn first. This is him that's him right there. And these are his kids. He actually was the first patriarch of the Lake George property. Nobody lived there till 1877. So we had it in 1812. And then finally the homestead was built. He tried to enlist in the Union Army. And in Glens Falls, it wasn't accepted. And then he went someplace else, I think to Fort Anne. He got accepted. And then, because he was a little young. And when he was in the Army, he fell off of a train while it was moving and did a permanent injury to his back. So that's why he looks kind of stooped over and not very comfortable. So he farmed the Lake George property. In a moment, I'll show you a picture of our clearing with a cow in it. Which is just amazing. And then he was very involved in history. And so he co-founded the American Historical Society in 1898. And he was the first custodian of the Lake George battlefield site. And another thing that I think is really unusual about him is he sent his girls to college, and not just any college. They went to Cornell, which became co-ed in 1870. And 2 of his 6 children died very young. I'll talk about that in a moment. So this is one of his advertisements, a cluster of charming summer homes at Joshua's Rock on Lake George. So he talks about it having a mile of shoreline, camping ground for clubs, lots for reasonable terms. And so he must have also gotten into the construction business. So my brother being a realtor, that's kind of funny, and my mom too, because the cottages were built at moderate prices, and they had I've seen the Joshua's Rock post stamp. So they had some kind of post office situation, and delivery of fresh meat, milk, eggs, berries. And that's what's really kind of funny is when he advertises this, he talks about these famous people, like his brother, like Edward Eggleston's brother, George Carey Eggleston, was a well-known editor and writer. Of course, he talks about Edward Eggleston and some of these other very prominent people. So here's farming and construction at Joshua's Rock. So this right here, this person, this is my great aunt, Cynthia Stremple. And I got this from her scrapbook. And I don't know if you guys can see you see the cow right here? So there's the cow, there's fence line here. We did for a long time, they had quite a few apple trees on the property. Unfortunately, we didn't quite know how to take care of them, and they did have to be removed. The other thing is they had the Loomis house in the clearing, and it burned in 1907. And they kind of made a rule, no more houses in the clearing, because it really kind of took away from the experience of being in the clearing. So Elizabeth Craig Eggleston, who was Edward Eggleston's daughter, married, she came up to Lake George with her father, Edward Eggleston, and they really did like the area. And she met Reuben Seelye, and she ended up marrying him. She had a really strong book hunger. Sounds familiar. I got in trouble for reading too much because I had the book in front of me as I was walking down the hallway in 3rd grade. She was always a writer and educated by private tutors. But then she went, they spent some time in Lake George, and they also spent some time in Brooklyn. And she ended up like going to adult classes for French and German. And she was so good with language that she added 500 words to the Century Dictionary because she had an expertise in Middle English. She married Reuben Seelye and moved to Lake George, and then her father and her sister Allegra Eggleston would follow. They had 6 children. Allegra, Blanche, Elwyn, Edward, Cynthia, and Elizabeth. And unfortunately, both Allegra and Edward died quite young. This painting of her, there's like a biography book of important women. And her sister, Allegra Eggleston, if you see the AE in any of Edward Eggleston's books, that's her signature. She painted that. For her sister to be in that book. This is one of her books, The Story of Columbus by Elizabeth Eggleston Seelye, edited by Edward Eggleston. And you can see here she wrote 8 different books. So she was quite prolific considering she had 6 children besides. The Tragedy of Allegra Eggleston. I'm going to read this from the Glens Falls Weekly first, and then I'll talk about the bullets. Miss Seelye possesses a rare degree, the gift of her family. Her mental and especially her imaginative powers were of the very highest order. She was a beautiful and precocious child. Her brief life was a singularly happy and varied one. She went twice to Europe, remaining a year each time and studying there. At home, she attended the best schools, including Glens Falls Academy, and spent 4 happy years at Cornell, one of the group of noble, modern young women to be seen in colleges, women who combine all the most womanly qualities with a firm determination to seek an independent career life. She taught during the last year at Berkeley Institute in Brooklyn. So she grew up on Lake George. We actually have her journal. I have the first couple pages of it right here, and I'm going to just excerpt from it a little bit. She graduated from Cornell with high honors. And she taught at Berkeley Institute in Brooklyn. The family had a property in Ithaca because they were sending all these kids to Cornell. So the parents wanted to be involved, I think probably in home games and all of that. So she was out visiting some sorority sisters, and she went for a walk like she liked to do for her exercise. And a storm blew up, and she sheltered under a tree. And unfortunately, that was the tree that got hit. And she was literally, I think, blown out of her shoes. It was really, really bad. And her friends went out looking for her, and they finally found her. She was like, her foot was caught in a root of the tree, and she was kind of hanging like she would have fallen into the lake. So it's just really sad. But I just wanted to share a couple. So I actually shared this journal because I was teaching English in middle school, a glimpse of 1991. And so she was imagining the future in 100 years. And she wrote about how that we're going to go flying across the country in less than an hour. Men will put on belts, which will enable them to fly up into the air like a bird. And then she talks about how all of the countries in Russia will be, or in Europe will be republics, including Russia. Russia will be first, which she wasn't quite right on that. But she said men will not be allowed to sell whiskey except at a drugstore. So she's definitely into the temperance. When two nations quarrel, they will be able to settle their quarrels without cruel and bloody wars, let us hope. For it is a dreadful thing for men to fall on one another like wild beasts when they cannot agree. And I just, she was 12 when she wrote this. You know, it's, and I shared that with the kids, and then we just, she said that hopefully by 1991, women will be able to vote and run for president. So, so she's one of the, another one of Elizabeth and Elwyn's kids is Blanche Eggleston Seelye Law. She also went to Cornell University. She married when she was 29 and her husband was 29. They waited to get married because he wanted to make sure he could support her financially. She was a very talented artist and also a seamstress. And she helped her husband Lido run a gentleman's farm and feed mill in Collins, New York. They owned the thicket. Their kids were Allegra, Ben, and Grace. And when she was 60, she took in and raised Grace's children because they were orphans. So she took over the care of Guilford, Bill, Carrie, and Lizzie Baldwin. This quilt up here is in the Crandall Library's Folk Life Center. It's the Eggleston quilt. And on one of those patches, you can see Blanche Eggleston's name. So she kept a 7-year journal, which Lido transcribed for the family. And they actually went on a honeymoon trip up to the Narrows and to the Mother Bunch. So I thought I'd just share a little bit from this. It's a 1911 journal excerpt. July 16th, married at 1 p.m. All her journal entries were like 2 to 3 sentences long. They weren't like these big long things like what Allegra wrote. Witnesses were Mr. and Mrs. Law, Jerry, Ted, Chuck, Herbert, Cynthia, Betty, Mother, Dad, Tante, Mabel, Carrie, Mrs. Townsend, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Townsend. At 3:30, started down the lake, spent the night in the boat Cornell, anchored out off Huckleberry Island next to Log Bay. That's the boat right there. Then on Monday, took a swim off Cornell, ate breakfast at Huckleberry, caught in shower, stop in Paradise Bay. I don't know how she showered. Mailed postal and letter at Pearl Point, which is now the Napa State. Spent night in the Cornell off Harbor in the Narrows. Terrible rain, BSL a little sick. Tuesday, visited Hewlett, phoned Dad, visited the Mother Bunch in the PM, and selected campground. Got water at Deer's Leap Spring, camped for the first time on the Mother Bunch. Wednesday, left camp at 7 a.m., rode to Black Mountain Point, climbed mountain, met interesting fire warden for whose benefit we acted like the old married couple. I thought that was very funny. Up late on Thursday, rode to Hewlett and got 4 letters from Mr. and Mrs. Lido W. Law. Stiff wind coming back. In PM, rode round Mother Bunch, Hatchet, and another group. Friday, up at 4:30, left camp at 7, mailed cards at Hewlett's. Propeller blade got loose at Silver Bay. Lido fixed it. Went to the end of the lake, back for lunch. Saturday, broke up camp, left Mother Bunch at 9:20, home at 11. Wrote our thanks letters. So I thought that was just really a sweet compilation of some of her entries. Now, her younger brother was Elwyn Eggleston Seelye, my great-grandfather, called Bob or Uncle Chuck. He graduated in 1904 from Cornell, and he got the very prestigious award for civil engineering called the, I don't know how to pronounce that, Frotes Award. It's this medal over here that you see. And he actually worked on Grand Central Terminal. He worked on the Jefferson Memorial, the original Tappan Zee Bridge, which was a challenge because it was during the Korean War when we had a steel shortage. And actually, I learned it had 5 different types of bridge in it, you know, from talking with my family members. The Northway, the first radio telescope in West Virginia, Library of Congress, the British Museum, lots of military bases. And he also was an author, but these were very technical books. They were 3 books for engineers. If you wanted to put a clay tennis court in your backyard, you could look in one of these books, get all the specs and be able to do it. And he was Joshua's Rock Corporation founder and first president. He married Eleanor Janeway. And my mom talked lots of stories about what an outdoorsman he was. He taught them how to fish. You know, he liked to hunt, boating, hiking, camping. All these outdoor activities were really important to him. He moved to Westchester and lived in White Plains. He lived on 12 Myrtle Street. And ironically, my husband and I lived in 3 Myrtle Street when we first moved to White Plains. So we were diagonally across from my great-grandparents' house. And they had 4 children: Jane, Mimsy, my grandmother, Elwyn, Bud, Elizabeth, and Edward, who we called Uncle Odd. And he loved that name. He wasn't mad at us for calling him Uncle Odd. He was often on the property with his big tractor mowing all weekend with a cigar out of his mouth, and he was a psychiatrist. He looked like Sigmund Freud on a lawnmower, you know. Now, Cynthia Eggleston Seelye, she graduated from Cornell. She was on the basketball team. She's right there. I am so thankful to her because so many of my pictures in this slideshow come from her. That's her with her camera, and she took so many fabulous pictures. This is her with her 2 children. Judy and Edward, we called him Ned, and she's standing next to the 1906 Cadillac Mark K Roadster, and this is the little wagon wheel track that goes by the homestead as you're going out of the property tonight now. Elizabeth Betty Seelye Branson, she was the youngest Seelye child. She went to Cornell, but from what I understand, she had a bad breakup with her boyfriend and she transferred to the University of Michigan. So, which I think was kind of funny. She had 3 children, Mark, Nancy, and Peter, lived in Niskayuna. Her oldest son, Peter, ended up being in the Coast Guard and having a career in the Coast Guard, being very successful. Unfortunately, she died of breast cancer at the age of 46. I believe that this picture the original one is in the Chapman somewhere. That's what one of my cousins was telling me, but she was absolutely beautiful. And unfortunately, we lost her too young. The 5th and 6th generation at the lake, this is 1932. Thank you, Kit, because all of these people are labeled. You know? So starting right here, we have Grace Law Baldwin, and then Betty Seelye Branson. So you can, my grandmother's right here. And look at the dogs; they had to be in the picture. And then, and that's out in front of I can't tell if that's Mellowstone or the Owl's Nest. But it's a pretty amazing picture. So purchasing Joshua's Rock, how did we get it? So as I said, it was French Mountain tract number 10. It started out as a 200-acre tract. Reuben Seelye purchased it with Halsey Rogers in 1812. And Halsey was quite a successful businessman. I know he was like what you just posted about the bank. He was involved in the bank. And it comprised of lakeside woods on the main lake in western shore of Dunhams Bay and going up the mountain. In 1812, when we purchased it, it was in Washington County. And Warren County was established in 1813. And Reuben bought Halsey's share out in 1819, and we don't know why, but we're glad he did. I don't have to point it? I hope that it's not getting a low battery. So this is the deed right here. And it was bought for, they had $126 down payment and $63 a year for the next 6 years. And price adjusted for inflation, they still did pretty well, I'd say. So yeah, so we have 100 acres left. Some were sold. 2 members of the family each inherited 25 acres, where the Ellsworths were, and now Aprilla, that was part of the 25 acres of, and then traded, and then taxes. Like I said, two properties in the middle had to be sold out. One was just a garage, and the other was a big kind of rambling cabin, which is still there. The Clinks own that now. We're glad that Elwin E. Seelye, which is my great-grandfather, he did not like that his father had sold out so much property. So he really wanted to preserve it. We had a fire on Joshua's Rock, and that's the bucket brigade right there. And there's little whisperings that it might have been Elwin E. Seelye when he was a teenager that left a campfire unattended. We're not exactly sure. And because he's not in this picture, and neither is his mother, so we're thinking maybe he got in trouble, you know. These are Seelye relatives plus people that bought the land around there, and friends that were there. So I love these pictures. This one in the upper left, this was in Cynthia's scrapbook. She called that top of the rock dock on Joshua's Rock. There was actually a dock there, and we haven't had a dock there in years. But I like that beginning slide, you saw that beautiful white dress. She was standing on Joshua's Rock. The only way she could have done that is, you know, to have a dock. And Cynthia Strempel, who's Cynthia Seelye Strempel, who is scrapbook this is, she's right there. You know, so this right here, this is my grandmother, this is my mom, my Uncle Jim, and my Aunt Lynn. I don't know who that is. This is my Aunt Lynn, actually, water skiing. My mom, she was very athletic. She skied the length of Lake George on a slalom ski one day behind the Cherie. So, oh yeah, and they would go off the dock, and then they'd ski right up onto the beach and only get their ankles wet. 5 miles an hour in Dunhams Bay now, so that's not happening anymore. So this is Cindy right here. Look at how heavily dressed they are when they're out. I always thought, well, if they capsize, they're going to sink, you know. Gretchen painted this. So we really love this picture. This is a family picnic. This is Elwin, the first Elwin. That's Cynthia right there. They're out picnicking and obviously having fun, and it's one of the few non-posed shots that we have. My cousin Gretchen, she painted a picnic picture, so I put that in there. So the homestead, it started out looking like this. And like I said, it was built in 1877. They let the ivy grow all over it. I don't know if it was the Cornell influence or what. Collies were this is Cynthia with a collie. And look at this row of hedges. And right here is a mounting block to either get up on your carriage or your horse. And that mounting block is still there. So my great-grandfather, Elwin E. Seelye, he was quite a hunter, and he liked to shoot skeet and stuff. And my mother told me this story. She says, look at the, when you first walk in over here, there's like a door, and it's kind of like very much a workshop, and there's a hole in the wall. And my mom said, you know how that hole got there? Your great grandfather was cleaning a gun, and he didn't make sure it was unloaded. So that was kind of a cautionary tale for all of us. The Owl's Nest was Edward Eggleston's home. It was built in 1881. They used local stone. I love the stone for both of those buildings, very warm, brown, very beautiful. And they used lots of nature motifs. Like up here, it's like it's hard to see with this paint job, but it very much looks like a sun. And that was Edward Eggleston's primary residence. And Elizabeth Eggleston Seelye lived there with her family, as well as Allegra Eggleston Tonti, the aunt who did all the paintings for Edward Eggleston's books. And it went on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1972. The only kit provided this picture. You can see here it is right here, and that's the wooden structure. That's the only picture I have right now. And this is Kit's dad, Bud, out in the middle of, middle of the winter. Yeah, yes. So Mellowstone was Edward Eggleston's library. And it was built in 1881-82, or the Richardsonian architecture. So it has a Romanesque, very arched fireplace. You can see here, this is it today. They kept these bookcases, but there were bookcases everywhere. And this is a cased opening that wasn't there. That was an exterior wall. That's where they put the kitchen and dining room when they did the refurb on it. But this was heavily influenced by family trips to Europe, especially the sunburst on the front, which you can see right here. Allegra Tonti, she signed AE. There's some artwork in there, and she actually was a wood carver too. So she carved a big piece that went above the fireplace. She carved you have picture or the windows, you have like a shelf like this because it's stone, and she carved some beautiful artwork there on those. Come on. Oh, the other thing I want to mention before I get off, maybe it told me not to get off the slide, is right here, this was the sleeping porch. So that's where they put all the kids, but there were quite a few cousins trying to share that house. And that's why my grandmother built the leasehold house. This right here was the summer kitchen, and there was a bathroom here. There was a kitchen and a dining room, and that was all on that concrete slab that I mentioned. So. The thicket, I haven't been in the thicket since I was a teenager, but I think from what I understand, it's pretty much the same. It is the quintessential Adirondack cottage. And it's also closest to the Joshua's Rock trailhead. The Baldwin family, 3 generations are sharing it. And the driveway that they use, they have to share with the 2 houses that are not part of our family, the 2 outside families. So Pinafore, that's my branch. And the reason it's called the Pinafore, I put this apron up here, is because it had three parts. And now that this is a 2-bedroom winterized, it looks like a pinafore that you would wear. So that's why it was called Pinafore. I was like, is it over HMS Pinafore? That's what I wondered. It had to do with the play, but not according to my grandmother. So we have this table. My great-grandfather, Elwyn E. Seelye, the civil engineer, he cut the lumber, had it seasoned in that porch, and then built that table right there. It has no nails, and it's just a magnificent piece, and we're so happy to still have it. all my cousins had their weddings there, except for my husband and I did not, because we got married in 1989. We had like 190 people invited to our wedding, and we would have had to have 2 big tents, and it was cost prohibitive. So our reception was on the Horicon when it was a new boat. It was pretty special. So this is Camp Allegra, Lito's family's property. And I love going down there and see the daffodils when spring is starting here. And the house is all very open and sunny. Our family meetings that we have in July are usually at this table. I think you have the most privacy of all of us. So when we do a hike out to Joshua's Rock, we start at the road, and then we end up. This is the little treacherous part, because you have tiny little. You'll fall in the lake if you're not careful. Right in here, supposedly this was a Native American wintering ground, and they found pottery and arrowheads and everything. So this is our little hike out to Joshua's Rock, and not too far from Joshua's Rock is that virgin forest that I was talking about. We also have the graveyard that we've had for a very long time, and this is Reuben's gravestone. This is Edward Eggleston's gravestone, and we have a bench out there. We call it our Cathedral of Pines and Hemlocks, and we, like I said, we have lots of writers, and so when we have a funeral there, we're often reading poetry or some beautiful piece of memoir that somebody wrote. So this is Edward Eggleston. He lived in the property from 1877 to 1902. And he worked as a preacher, an editor, a writer, a journalist. He co-founded he wrote the first book of American history. So he had 2 firsts. One is the first book of American history was his. And the other thing was that he used dialect in his novels before Mark Twain did. Okay, and he was friends with Mark Twain. He co-founded the Authors Club, and he was really worried about, he lived off the royalties to his books. And when his books were going to be sold in Europe, would there be a copyright issue? So he wanted to make sure that other people weren't going to profit off of his books. So he had the American Copyright League to try to stop that from happening. He built Mellowstone, the Owl's Nest, and the Thicket, editor of the New York Independent. And he wanted to establish the library because people were constantly borrowing books from him, and he saw a need for it, especially if you're in a horse and carriage or a horse and it's wintry. What are you going to do? You're not watching television, before that. And he was the president of the American Historical Society, and he wrote an amazing speech that unfortunately he wasn't able to deliver. He got pneumonia, but he printed that speech got printed in their journal, and it talks about politics in a way that we could really benefit from looking back at what he wrote then. There. Yeah, I wonder if it needs a new battery. It's not my pickle. They're called pickles, apparently. And so he wrote 22 books. He started out writing novels. Then he got into writing juvenile kid books, and then history books, and then religion. And this right here is one of Tanti's, his daughter's, she was drawing all the waterways in the eastern United States. So she was really helpful to him. There we go. Well, so I love I'm just going to share what he said about novels. A novel should be the truest of books. It partakes in a certain sense of nature of both history and art. It needs to be true to human nature in its pertinent and essential qualities, and it should truthfully represent some specific and temporary manifestation of human nature. It has been objected that I have copied life too closely, But it seems to me that the work to be done just now is to represent the forms and spirit of our own life, and thus free ourselves from habitual imitation of that which is foreign. I have wished to make my stories valuable as a contribution to the history of civilization of America. And so that I thought was pretty telling. He's called kind of like the father of realist novel writing. And when he passed, his brother George Carey Eggleston wrote, "The dominant trait of the man is his limitless generosity. He is generous of such money he possesses, but that is the very least of it. He is even more profitably generous to others of helpful influence or sympathy, of inspiration, and of that goodwill that counts for merely so much more than merely material help." And I love this drawing that Allegra did of him in his study that's in Mellowstone, and this is a actual photograph.
Is that his typewriter?
Yep, and Kit owns his typewriter. And she, by the way, she was a journalist for the New York Times. She was the New England bureau chief, so she really he was a journalist, and so is she. So is she. She still writes. So Mountainside Library. Edward Eggleston conceived a Mountainside in 1894 as an antidote to winter depression and donated 300 of his own books to start it. Today, it has thousands of up-to-date volumes. I was talking to Linda Lawn. There's 10,000 books in that library right now, plus your books, your CD books and your VHS, or not VHS, but your DVDs. A children's nook and an enviable mystery crime section. I started being on the board in September and helped Linda put some books away. People love to read mysteries around here. So Edward Eggleston's gift to the community, they had to donate and fundraise for like 10 years. And Andrew Carnegie gave them the $1,000 to finally make it happen. So Kate Hogan, she was the district attorney here. The library is a handshake with the community, I think is a wonderful quote. So it's open 365 days now. We have hours 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. because we couldn't get insurance if we were open 24/7, without people being there. So it's an honor system. There's a volunteer library board, librarians, and then people will come and build shelves or do whatever needs to be done to upkeep that library. And this year there's hosting a garden party on July 12th. We're not going to have the book sale this year. We want to give back to our patrons. So there's the plaque for the library and the plaque for Owl's Nest. So utilization of the property now. In 1812, altogether, it was bought and used for lumber. In 1877, we had a homestead built. 1882, Owl's Nest and Mellowstone. It was the summer homes between 1910 and 1975. The men would come up on the train to Lake George Village, and the wives would go get them, because it was a 12-hour drive from Westchester on Route 9 to get to Lake George. And then in 1967, the Thruway Northway opened. Still used seasonally. Jane Seelye West is the only person that had lived there year-round. We do some renting to pay for taxes and improvements, and the local families do get a chance to use it a little bit more because we have boats there. So we're all about family history, preserving the property, library service. We want to protect our virgin forest, volunteering. My brother is one of the busiest people I know. It's not just because of the real estate, but it's all his rescue stuff that he does. And Lake George Association. So I have a poem I want to share with you that I wrote that I think kind of captures what it was like to be on that property. It's called Water Child. Mom reclines on a weather-beaten lawn chair. The wind stirs her hair into a shiny brunette cloud. One eye squints shut, the other open a slit, watching my water play. Gusts shiver the water, sun-splashed wavelets flow around me like leaves of gold. I sink and rock ever so slightly. Silence, warmth envelops me. Frothing up to gasp for air, I watch white cloud swirls hurl across the sky faster, their shadows rippling up the green field as the sun creeps down. With a swish, I glide onto my back. Long blonde hair streams a curling curtain, briefly blinding me. I begin backward somersaults, a 10-year-old willow branch arching. I lock my feet, twirl my arms. Water rushes, tickling bubbles surround me. Mom calls. I catch pieces of her echo across the bay. Pretend I'm deaf. 100, I gurgle, spin faster, not wanting to go home and help fix dinner at 5 prompt. Let me stay a water child, turning in this crystalline lake. So I'm actually working on a memoir. It's called Lake Girl, and it's about growing up on the lake. Does anybody have any questions?